you though, we're not getting a lot of guys in that are both competent and sophisticated. They're one or the other. They've been exposed to something. If they've been exposed to a really sophisticated level of training, but they're not competent at the movements, more often than not, we got to undo some stuff. Right. And then if we have guys that are competent but haven't been exposed to a lot of a good training program, well then, great, you can do the exercise.
So when you're saying, and I know I'm videotaping here, so when you say competent, are you saying competent from movement skill wise? Like be able to hip hinge, be able to get the positions you're looking for. When you're saying weight room competence is body positioning, right?
Yep, being familiar around a bar, knowing what you're doing, knowing how to do it, being able to move that bar and your body in a what we would consider to be good training.
So let me ask you this: do you think it's when you bring kids in, it's a strength issue, it's a mobility, stability issue? You know what I'm saying? Like sometimes, like you said earlier, like we just gotta go get them stronger. You know what I mean? Like a lot of times it's like you said, sexy is kind of neat, but it's like sometimes you just we got to get you stronger. We got to get you underneath the bar now, because now you can get into these positions. Because the reason you can't get in it isn't because of stability, mobility, whatever. It's because you don't have the strength to hold yourself in that position with the load.
That's an accurate assessment. Okay. We have people once they get a competency for the movement, once we're checking those, we're like, hey, that's very good, that's very good, that's very good, and we start applying load to it, they skyrocket up in strength pretty quick, because they're athletes. Let's make no mistake, they're here for a reason. They're very athletic people, and now some of them have never trained before, and some of them had great programs, and some of them are really athletic and have developed athletically despite the programs that they were in. So it's finding that mixed bag. Now, again, our coaching staff has been very good about, I feel like every year they've given me better athletes. Like they're getting better athletes in there. There's not so much undoing and redoing. And then it's clear and obvious to me over the course of my career that, so there was 20 years ago, and you might even recognize this. 20 years ago, nobody knew what they were doing, but we had some pretty good athletes, and so but nobody's screwed up. Right? You get great pieces of clay, and you're like, man, this is great. But they don't already have a lot of issues that some of these tight hip flexors, bad posture, stuff like that we have kids come in with now. So 20 years ago, what I was seeing was nobody knows what they're doing, but nobody's screwed up. And then about probably 10 years ago, it was these kids are training hard, but they're not very good at moving because they don't have a strength coach. Like they understand that high schools understand that weightlifting is really going to help them out, so they're doing it, but they might not necessarily have been very, very good at delivering the program. So we get kids that are kind of screwed up, and we got to undo a whole bunch of stuff. Now, within the last 5 years, I feel like high schools are investing in strength and conditioning. They're investing in sports performance. They're getting people like yourself coming in and teaching their young kids how to move in a weight room, how to address a bar, how to move their body through a full range of motion. And so it's really exciting because I'm getting kids that I don't have to undo anything, and they're also pretty strong, pretty athletic. So it's finding what they're good at, moving those things forward, but then working on those little side projects individually to make sure that, hey, okay, well, you're pretty good at this, but this kind of needs some work. Well, let's feed that. Let's not hold them back on those things that they're good at. Let's move them forward, but also pile in the things that they really need. And that becomes much more interesting training.
Well, let me ask you this, Coach, because like pull yourself out of the college, because I always say if you give me better athletes, I'm a really good strength coach.
But Coach Rozy, we've talked. That's why I love being at this level. Like they're projects, and they're hungry, and they love working out. But I really have to wring out every level of athleticism, every little ounce drop that I can out of them, because we're not getting thoroughbreds. We're getting good, hungry athletes that want to work hard.
So let me ask you this: how do you pull, I'm going to pull you out of the college situation, put you in a high school where?
Please don't.
No, right? But I know. But we have some kids that it's like, and they're great kids, and they're going to work their heinies off. You know what I'm saying? But you look at them and you say, your goal should be to make your high school basketball team or be on the varsity. You know what I mean? Like if you went to a big school somewhere in a bigger city, you wouldn't be out for sports. I mean, that's just the reality of the situation. Where we have to look at a program and go, you know, where do we cut our ties and just say, look, we're going to just have to basic this up, maybe have two different groups. One that's going to be for more athletics. I know you probably don't I mean, your kids are able to, you know, lift weights and chew gum and do some things where we have some kids that it's a challenge just from a move, but they're hardworking kids. They want to be involved in sports. Their friends are in sports. How would you, as a strength coach at, let's just say a high school, small high school, divide that up to say, look, this kid, I can work 6 years with him, and I don't know if they're ever going to get those natural movement patterns down.
Yeah. No, you bring up a really good point, and that's not to say that we don't get those athletes even at this level. What it comes down to is, I believe being strong is the reservoir for everything else. Yep. Conditioning, explosiveness, your first step quickness, your agility, your resiliency, your everything is the reservoir that all of that stuff draws from in order to train is just getting stronger. A lot of these kids, some kids, they may not seem all that athletic now because they're going through a growth spurt. Right. And you're like, wow, that kid can't move very well. Well, shoot, he just grew 6 inches. So of course he hasn't figured out his own body yet. But you can still get those athletes stronger. And you can't just get them stronger for the sake of being stronger. You have to get them stronger and also make sure that they're still moving through that full range of motion. They're still being very balanced in how they train. And I don't think that's that complicated. I think it's really actually pretty simple and pretty basic, but then also find ways to keep them interested. Find ways to challenge their athleticism, even if it's not very good. Find those ways that you can push them along athletically and dangle that carrot out in front of them so that they keep taking their medicine, which is getting stronger. Yeah,
and that's what, I mean, and we can get to the other stuff. That's what we always kind of talk about too. It's like you and I talked to you before we started taping, it's like kids like sexy. Sometimes it's like, sometimes you have to do some of the unsexy because you have to grind just a little bit. And then we can get to the sexy stuff, but let's grind. Like there has to be a point where you got to grind some before we can get sexy.
Yeah, we, I mean, with social media right now, that's something that we didn't have to deal with 20 years ago. Kids want to do the things that look fun. Let's be honest. There's a lot of tap dancing and shoot. Some of them look like they belong in the circus.
Right.
That looks cool and it looks athletic, but it's an athletic endeavor. It's what they're doing. I don't take away from the fact that it's athletic, but the fact is it developing them as an athlete? And that answer is no. Right. You really have to have, with any of the movements that we do, we really have to hold it up to critical thinking and say, is this a demonstration of athleticism? Or is this something that is pushing their athleticism forward?
Right.
And when it can say it's pushing it forward, well, then we want that in our training. And if it's just a demonstration of their athleticism, well, then that's not necessarily something that's going to go a long way towards pushing them forward athletically.
Let me ask you something real quick. So are you seeing a comparison between, like you said, freshmen coming in that are competent and non-competent and injury rates? Like, are you seeing that people that are competent are getting injured less, the people that do have that you have to kind of, rebuild or tear down a little bit, are they more prone?
I'm going to say this. So and this is me beating my chest. We keep our kids very healthy. Our athletes they train very well. I think my staff does a great job of identifying issues and addressing them. We get those things balanced out. And that's why we keep our freshmen away from the rest of the group for the first 6 months so we can really focus on that. But the fact is when we get athletes that come in and they've already had surgeries, they've already had problems, or they come in with an inherent issue that we recognize through their movement, their running, their bounding, their lifting. When we see kids who already have these little big red flags on there, I guarantee you that training is at the root of it. It's a young 18-year-old kid shouldn't be having some of the issues that we're seing come in. We're like, well, this kid's already had 3 knee surgeries. something's wrong. Something's very wrong. Let's find out what it is and fix it. Sometimes it's congenital. I get that. More often than not, it's rooted in the training, and it's where somebody has been put in a position to coach something that they're not capable of coaching just yet, and they've maybe pushed and overreached a little bit further than they should have without having a really high level of competency for what they're looking at, and that's where I'm alarmed.
Yeah.
That's the one thing that I see that concerns me.
You're seeing kids come in without a very high level of coaching, where their summer program or their off season or their in season program was come in, clean heavy, squat heavy, bench heavy, and then do a million sit-ups, and that's your work.
Yeah, and you're like, well, this kid's got back problems, and this kid's got shoulder problems, and this kid's got knee problems, and it's like, it ain't rocket science. Like, it's just not a balanced training program. Or they've overreached beyond what their ability to move through that well is. And it happens. Now, don't get me wrong, some kids, it happens. We play sports. There is risk in sport. But more often than not, the kids that we have that come in that have some real issues, we find that it's probably rooted in their training.
Well, let me ask you this, last then we'll get into the Olympic lifting. But Let me ask you this, because the thing is, and we've seen it before, it's like summer programs are really pretty good. I mean, with the dedication and everything else. Yeah. And then what we see is it's like, well, I have football, I got basketball, I got track, I have baseball, I've got volleyball, I've got basketball, I got, I mean, from the girls' standpoint too. And coach say, well, we are getting a workout in because we're doing our sport. And that's been our challenge to try to educate and say, but not saying you have to go in for an hour and a half or an hour, 4 days a week or 5 days a week, but we can do something. You guys need to be doing something through these 10 months, because if you're not, we're just seeing the schools that have the problems, a lot of injuries they're doing a great job in the summer, but it's almost like, well, if you're not going to train all year long, maybe it would be better to work on your skill set and do it. I mean, you want to say, because we're getting pretty strong, and then what we see is by the next summer when we go back to schools that we're not able to work with all year long, we're back at square one.
Yeah. And
it's just like, for 4 years, we're just going up and down the ladder. We're never going to extend the ladder because there's just no opportunity to be able to do that. What do you say to coaches from that standpoint and thinking, well, I just don't have time in my in-season basketball program to go into the weight room for a half hour because I got to practice basketball for an hour and a half.
Yeah, I understand that. And that's, I guess, my caution to coaches at that level is that you're spending money that belongs to those kids. There's yes, I understand to be competitive that they need to spend more time on that skill part, but the fact is that that's part of that whole overreaching thing. If they're constantly doing the same thing over and over and over again, it's easy for me to look. I have one of my sports that I train is golf. They're doing the same movement over and over and over again. And if I don't do something to mitigate that, we're going to have mid-20-year-old people with some real issues. We have to continue to train. If you only have 15 minutes, 20 minutes, you need to get them in the weight room and do something to offset all the repetitive movements that they're doing for their sports. And as far as a multi-sport, obviously the big thing now, everybody's so excited about multi-sport athletes, myself included. There's nothing I love more than an athlete who's competed in just about everything. Right. Because that, to me, is a true athlete. You got to find time. You go from one season to the next season to the next season. You never have an off season to be able to kind of balance things out, build things up, try and offset some of the repetitive use issues that somebody can have. You got to find the time. You got to make the time. You got to put, even if it's just a small amount, you got to devote some time to that, because it's what's going to keep those kids after they've graduated as a senior, and then I get to work with them. I get them for 4 or 5 years. I want them to be healthier leaving me than whenever I got them. And if I'm not doing that, I'm doing those kids an enormous disservice. Yeah. And sometimes I get some pushback from coaches. I get it. I understand it. But if I'm dedicating to those kids, I'm never going to be wrong.
Right.
So it's I'm very passionate about that. That's one of those things I want our athletes 20 years from now to look back and be like, I'm glad I did that, because that's now, and then to still be doing some of the things that they did because they saw value in it. And they may not be playing their sports anymore, but they recognized how valuable it was to their overall health. And I think that's a big service that I get to give these young men and ladies.
Unconventional approach to the muscle clean. This is one of our fundamental barbell movement patterns. We from day one, whenever we get a guy in, and we're going to start working on their basic barbell training, whether or not they're going to do Olympic lifts, we're still going to do this muscle clean, because what this exercise does is help us really develop those postural muscles of the upper back. It's really something that, and you can blame it on society right now, but we have a lot of kids that come in, their shoulders are a little forward, their postural strength is not very good. We want to speed that up and hack that as quickly as possible so that we can get on to some heavier training. Okay, whether it be doing the Olympic lifts, or whether just making sure that they can do a good front squat. So what Zach here is going to do is go ahead and address the bar and walk out away from the rack. He's going to demonstrate a couple reps, and then we're going to kind of break it down a little bit. All right, so when we first teach kids, we kind of want to pull the thinking part out of it. What he's going to do is we go on a ready, set, go command. Just because they start focusing on the command, they stop trying to overthink the exercise. On ready, what we tell them to do is we're standing as tall as we can right now, exaggerating our posture, trying to get the top of our head as far away from our feet as we can. So this is in a good position, good athletic position to start with. Grip on the bar is about bench press grip, knuckles are down. From here, we're going to tell him to go ready. He's going to draw the bar up to his hip crease. Now, that's not what people do a lot of times for the hang position. And that's okay. We're not doing a hang clean right now. What we're trying to do is make sure that the bar is in the right place for him to be able to drive with his legs. And this is a leg-driven exercise. A lot of times I'll see people come in, they've done hang cleans their entire career, and they've turned it into a back and a hip exercise. They're hip tossing the movement instead of pillaring the core, driving with the legs and the hips. Legs and hips, not back and hips. So we're gonna go with the ready. He's gonna draw the bar up to his hip crease. On set, he's gonna snap down into a quality athletic position. Now, bring it back up a little bit. That was a little bit too squatty for me. I don't want him to squat into the position so much as I want him to sit back a little bit, load up his hips and hamstrings, and be able to help with his quads, okay? So as he drives vertical. On set, he's snapping down. On go, he's going to push into the ground, extending his body violently, and then getting his elbows through to finish the rack position.
Can I ask you a question, Coach, on this? If you have a kid who has a hard time, especially with some of the coaches, that kids have a hard time hip hinging because they do this movement instead of this movement, how would you go or explain maybe how to teach the hip hinge?
I think we try and separate those out into two different movements right out of the gate. We're also going to be teaching the RDL right out of the gate. That's one of our basic movement patterns with the barbell. But for right now, we kind of want to disassociate these two things. Okay. I want them loading. I want it somewhere between a squat pattern and that hinge pattern. What I want them to be able to do is be able to load and use both the front side and back side of his legs to drive vertical. Because ultimately, when they do the lift, while this is not what happens during an Olympic lift, the intent is exactly the same, and that's to drive vertical, okay, from the ground. So again, we'll go through this real quick. What he's going to do is stand up nice and tall, exaggerating his posture, abs are tight, looks like Iron Man right now, right? So then he's going to go on the ready command, set, go, recover, ready, set, go, recover. That was a better rep than the last one. Ready, set, go, recover, last rep. Ready, set, go, recover. Now, what I'd like to do is get maybe some pictures of this from the back so we can see what it's doing for the postural muscles of his back, okay? So if you want to go ahead and turn around real quick, maybe just so you don't have to move.
Oh, there you go, okay.
Let's watch what's happening up here, okay? Right now, like I said, a lot of times we're looking at problems here. we get kids who say, well, I can't front squat because I can't hold the rack position or it's uncomfortable. A lot of times it's because these muscles back here are long and weak because of how we sit and how we look at our computers and how we look at our phones all the time. But we can strengthen this up really quick by using these muscle cleans and loading them up. So he's going to execute a couple reps on his own, and you're going to be able to see what those muscles are doing as he goes through the movements. See, you see his scapula move. You see those things working and moving the way that they're supposed to do healthfully. Now, when we start doing that with a decent amount of load, that's really going to get these guys strong in that position very quickly. We're going to make that front rack position so strong and so capable. They're going to stand up taller throughout the course of the day. They're going to look better, and ultimately their shoulders are going to be a lot healthier for them. One more rep for them. There you go. I hope you can see all of that on there. You're watching as he goes through that. Us doing that, and we really start adding some weight to that, it's really going to catch hold pretty quick. You can go ahead and set the bar cut. So the next exercise that's part of our fundamental training is we'll go ahead and set up for his front squat. You want him facing out, or like he can come out of the rack, but we probably want to come.
So yeah, if he can, walk out, so that way we can kind of see.
26.
Yeah, sure. Coach, how long do you use your cadence on those?
As long as I have to. We'll do it. We probably do it for the first couple of weeks whenever we're doing the muscle cleans, and then we will start to, instead of it being a lead up exercise, it becomes a training exercise. But we'll still do muscle cleans as part of our bar complex warm up, and so I'll still cadence them on that. Because then but then whenever they're doing it as one of their strength training pieces now, we'll let it do it on their own tempo. Now they're still following that same tempo, because ultimately we don't want them turning it into something that it's not. We only do that. To me, a muscle clean is only good as being a muscle clean. It shouldn't be a strategy for doing your power cleans or your anything else Olympic lift related.
Coach, question for age level. Like, can we start? Like maybe not. Like we have like the 25-pound bars. Is something where you could take your 5th, 6th graders and just start teaching this 7th and 8th grade? Like, are you looking at movement, or what would you say would be like these kids can? What age should we start doing this?
As soon as a kid can pick up a bar, I recommend start doing basic barbell training, because they're clean. When they're capable of doing this stuff right out of the gate. There's nothing wrong with them because we haven't screwed them up yet. So the fact is that the sooner you can get them started on it, the less undoing you have to do later on down the road. If we have kids who've never done this before, but they've done a lot of bench pressing, their posture's real bad, their shoulders are slumped forward, they haven't done a lot of back work, and that's pretty characteristic of a lot of kids the last probably 10 years. You got to undo that first. But if we started these kids younger, and there's nothing wrong with doing basic barbell training. You start them younger, you don't have to undo anything. So it really makes everything a whole lot better.
So, but you can go young at that age, right? Like they
Absolutely.
Have to wait for high school.
Yeah, there's my nephews, I would have no problem with them. We teach them how to do this stuff. I don't get to supervise them all the time, but the fact is I want them doing these things.
Right, okay, thanks.
So what Zach's gonna do now is go ahead and address the bar, not dissimilar from how he just finished the rack position on his muscle cleans. That's how we're gonna front squat. He's gonna squat under the bar, stepping up. He's gonna drive his elbows through. You see the same rack position that you did on the finish of his muscle cleans. Okay, so that helps speed up the process of doing some very reasonable load on their front squats. We choose the front squat because this is a fundamental squat pattern. Everybody should be able to do this. That's not to say you shouldn't back squat. That's not to say you shouldn't safety squat. Those are all great exercises. But the foundation of our training is doing the front squat. Because if somebody can front squat well, they can do all those other ones well. And it doesn't necessarily work in reverse. So he's all set up. He's got the bar in a good rack position. He's standing tall and straight. His abs are tight. We've got great strength and balance up there. And he's going to go ahead and execute his front squats now. That's a full deep squat. Again, if they can't, if we have to regress this, we might go to a kettlebell squat. We might go to a dumbbell squat. Anything that allows them to be able to do the full range of motion well. But as soon as we can get them to this point, we may have been doing muscle cleans for a while to get them to be able to establish a good rack position. Once we can do this, this is how we're going to start getting them pretty strong. Is we'll start squatting them with this, and we'll make them squat with this for about the first 6 months. And then as we get closer and closer to the end of the season, I will let our young guys start back squatting. And that's something that they've earned. It's a good thing. When they switch over to back squatting, they're already doing more weight than they've ever done before at back squat, and they're doing it better. So that's a beautiful thing. Again, we'll go ahead and watch Zach do this. He's got a great rack position. He's balanced. He's dropping his hips straight down. His core is nice and pillared. You don't see a lot of extra movement down there. He's getting a full deep squat. He's driving into the ground and drive back up again. You can go ahead and practice that. Probably need to pull your hands up too, brother. What else?
You want to talk about with the rack position, like if they have a hard time
Yeah,
getting into the rack position?
Okay. You ready to go?
Yeah. I'm just letting her run, coach.
Right. So we mentioned that some people, whenever they first started doing their front squats, can't get into this rack position, whether because of immobility or maybe they've had an injury. More often than not with our young athletes, it's because they just don't have the strength, the postural strength, and the mobility. Mobility is a product of being strong more often than not. So while we're working on those muscle cleans, strengthening that up, and that may take a couple weeks, we still want to squat them, okay? Now, they might not be able to hold that position, and we still need to move these athletes forward. So what we can do is a couple different strategies. We might start with a cross arm front squat, which would probably be this is probably for somebody who, if I'm never going to do Olympic lifts, this is okay. But if I'm going to Olympic lift them, I'm probably going to take a different strategy towards this. So Zach's going to demonstrate doing this with the crossed arm approach. I think most people are familiar with this. And again, there's nothing wrong with this unless ultimately you're looking to have these athletes do Olympic lifts, in which case you need to develop that strength and mobility to be able to hold this position. He's still got a nice flat back. He's still braced up. He's still going to lift his weights really well. Go ahead and do a couple squats.
So, Coach, on that, because you'll hear a lot of times, like our basketball guys, because long levers, they have a hard time getting into that rack position.
Yeah, sure. And it's uncomfortable. It is. It's uncomfortable. Most athletes, when they come in, they're like, I can't do this because it hurts too much. I'm like, well, does it hurt or is it uncomfortable? And if it's uncomfortable, if it hurts, I get it. We'll try and manage it. If it's uncomfortable, give me 2 weeks. Give me 2 weeks and see if it doesn't disappear after we've done this for a little bit. And if it doesn't disappear, we'll readdress it after 2 weeks. The fact is that more often than not, they're going to be able to do this stuff on the backside. They've just never gotten comfortable with being uncomfortable. Okay? And that's what a front squat is. Let's be honest. You do heavy front squats, there's nothing comfortable about doing it. But it's one of the best exercises we can do to make sure that guys stay healthy. So next up, do you have any straps that we could use? Any weightlifting straps?
Yep.
Straps.
So I'm going to have you go back to that again. We were just talking about using straps, like, and we'll show the straps with the front squat. But how often do you use straps? If guys do, or we're just talking like we don't have a lot of straps here. We have a few, but we don't use them a lot.
Yep. We really want to. Everybody wants to say, hey, I really need to work on my grip strength. And I'm like, well, your best opportunity to work on your grip strength is gripping a bar, whether it be if you're doing pull-ups or if you're doing RDLs, deadlifts, things like that. We try and go without straps as often as possible. Now at our top sets, our top loads, maybe we'll throw straps in if guys are at a very high level of load. If we're doing volume work with like lots of reps, heavy RDLs, stuff like that, then yeah, we might use some straps to make sure that their ability to hold the position doesn't start being limited by their grip strength. So, but all the sets that they did up to that work set, they're going to do without straps. We really do want to help develop that, because, and I don't think people recognize when you grip something really tight, and everybody should try that. Like, just ball up your fists and grip as tight as you can. You should be able to feel that in your shoulders. And when you do that, you feel that in your shoulders, even though I'm just gripping down here, that's working those deep muscles of your shoulders as well. And that goes a long way towards helping provide some very durable, very strong, very stable shoulders. So there's a lot of reasons why we don't want to necessarily use straps all the time. But we throw them in here as kind of an unconventional approach, or probably more of a stopgap, if you will, as we're taking somebody who lacks mobility in their shoulders and being able to get them into a front rack position to where they can front squat and do our muscle cleans. As we're constantly hammering that muscle clean, it's going to get better and better and better as they get stronger and more mobile. They're going to be able to do this exercise better. But we don't want to not do front squats this entire time. We want to be able to let them squat. So what we'll use is a strap to be able to work their way back down into position. Now, we talked about doing it cross-armed, and that's great. We do them cross-armed, you're okay. There's nothing wrong with that. But at the end of the day, if you're going to do any Olympic lifts, you're going to want to be able to get your elbows forward out in front of you. So right now what Zach is doing is using the straps to help him stay in that elbows up position. A lot of people will make the mistake when they use straps of trying to push out away with those straps. That's not what should be happening. Those straps should only be holding you in that elbow up, forearm back position. So there shouldn't be a whole lot of tension here. He should still be working on keeping his elbows up nice and strong, because that's what's going to help develop that postural strength that he needs to be able to lift a ton of weight doing this. So from here, he's going to go ahead and hit his front squats real quick, just like he normally would. Again, I shouldn't see any shaking or anything. I shouldn't see white knuckles here on it. All he's using those straps for are to keep his forearms bent and back as he does this. Because the fact is go ahead and release the straps. Go ahead and put your arms out in front of you, Zach. As long as straighten out your arms. Let go of it and straighten them out and just do a front squat. Yep. He should be able to do that. He should still be able to do a front squat. Okay? And there's no problem with that. And a lot of guys can do a really respectable amount of weight with just arms out in front of them. But that's not ideal either. So we're using those straps. If he just bent his elbows again, I should be able to get him back into position to be able to do his front squats.
So do you have any complex, more like if you see some guys, let's say you have 3 or 4 guys that can't get into that rack position, you put them on a specific, like any type of shoulder stuff, like, hey, to get you there quicker? Or do you just say, like, it's going to get there through the exercise
Muscle
we're doing?
cleans. Yeah. I hate to be that simple about it, and I hate to be that but you do those exercises, and it's going to help. It's good. It'll help even within one workout. If he just sat there and warmed, like, hey, I'm not very mobile through this area. Okay, we'll go over there and do a set of 20 muscle cleans. Come back over here and see if you can't get under the bar a little bit better. And I would venture to say 9 out of 10 times he's going to get in that rack position better just by moving those muscles enough to get them, moving that joint enough to be able to get into the position. Now, again, mobility comes from balance and strength. As he moves forward over a couple weeks of doing some muscle cleans and challenging that with an appropriate amount of weight, that rack position is going to be that much easier for him to get into. It's going to be that much more comfortable for him to be able to get into. Because after doing a whole bunch of those, this position is no longer something that doesn't feel good.
I think so. What do you guys do for belts?
Same thing as straps. We really don't use belts until we need to use belts. I think belts they're a crutch that probably too many athletes go to right out of the gate, because they make you feel safer, right?
Yeah.
But the fact is that most kids don't use them right. The belts that they use are not appropriate for what they're doing. And then they mask. Sometimes the worst thing is sometimes they mask some deficiencies that the kids have. Like we'll set up for cleans and a kid will throw a belt on. I'm like, man, I can't see what your pelvis, the interaction between your lower back and your pelvis is doing because you got that belt on. It's like, well, my back's been bothering me. I'm like, yeah, because you're doing the exercise wrong, not because because that belt's going to do anything to fix it. And to be honest with you, it's probably perpetuating the problem.
Yeah.
So
If your belt squat is 20-30% above your non-belt squat,
Yeah.
I mean, obviously you're covering up a problem.
yeah, yep, yeah. No, I would agree.
So, coach, in your like week long, your progression, like how often are you going to do this stuff? Like you do this every single day, like you said, as part of your warm up.
Every
Is
day.
it like, oh, we're doing this twice a week, or especially like if you start going some load, then do you start just implementing your program, or is this something like you said, even if it's like 2 days a week we're loading with this, but every day we're coming in and doing these movements as a warm up process?
So when we first get athletes in, they will go through probably their first week. We're kind of doing an evaluation of what they're doing. And then what we do is we're teaching them the exercises that are part of our bar complex warm up. We're teaching them the constituent pieces that make up the full warm up. So that's their strength training. Right out of the gate is we're learning these basic movements. It's, you want to go through these real quick?
Yeah, that would be
let's do it.
fantastic. I think
So you don't
coaches
mind
would
doing
love. I'd love to
full
see it.
bar
I think
warm-up?
coaches would love to see the whole warm up.
We'll stick. So their workout every day, because we're not doing any real massive load just yet. We'll let them push forward if we think that they're competent enough at it. But right out of the gate, we're teaching them the exercises individually that make up our bar complex. And then once they've mastered those exercises, we do the bar complexes every day. Once they get good at this bar complex, we start working on the next bar complex, the constituent parts of those. So we might spend 3 or 4 days on the clean bar warm up, 3 or 4 days on the snatch bar warm up, and then those movements that are within those warm ups become our basic strength training, basic barbell training. So what Zach's going to do now is we're going to go through the clean bar warm up. These clean bar warm ups are based off of movements that are fundamental movements to the human body. Most of this stuff I've stolen from either the functional movement screen or somebody as smart as Coach Rozy. So what I end up doing is taking these, and this is an evaluation process for us every day. And that's a question that they ask us a lot is, well, do you screen your athletes when they come in? Do you screen your athletes biannually? No, we screen our athletes every day they come in because they're going through this bar complex that lets us take a little peek into what's going on in their body. So the first exercise he's going to do is simple. This is just simple elevation and depression from the shoulders from the hang. So he's still standing in that good athletic position. I would rather see his shoulders going straight up towards his ears as opposed to rolling forward. But Zach, my man here, likes to bench press an awful lot. So he's a little tight up there. He's going to shrug up and down, not just shrugging and relaxing, but elevating and depressing. Elevating and depressing, pulling those shoulder blades down and back as he finishes. The next exercise we're going to go into is a simple hip hinge, the RDL. He's going to stand nice and tall, knees are soft, postured up. He's going to push his hips back towards the rack, loading his hamstrings once he gets to maximum load. And some people are different than others. Going lower is not always better. It's go to maximum load of the hamstring and then push into the ground and drive tall to return. Some people can take the plate all the way down to the ground. Some people can only go to the top of their knee. That's absolutely individual to that person. So he's going to reach down, try to push the bar into the floor, loading up his hamstrings, pushing his hips back towards the rack, and then he's going to push into the ground to return tall again. The next exercise he's going to do is at the bottom of his RDL, he's going to go ahead and start bent row. He's going to get in there, load up, knuckles down, and we're going to draw that bar straight into our belly button. Just go ahead and pushing it out, driving it in. Once he's done 5 reps of that, we're going to go ahead and hit our muscle cleans. We've already kind of gone over that. He's going to go through the ready, set tempo. I'm not going to give it to him. He's going to come in, and now he's really going to start working that mobility of his upper back. He might start driving an elbow up and through, working that a little bit more. Loading the legs, extending vertically violently. On his last rep, he's going to go ahead and leave it in that rack position. We're going to go into a backward lunge. Backward lunge. So he's going to reach back. We're going to do 2 reps on each side. From here, we're going to go into his overhead press, his front press. Now, we don't always necessarily teach them this right out of the gate. We want to see if they come in and we've got a lot of shoulder issues or we got a lot of postural issues, we don't like to put a lot of weight over their back just yet. But once we feel comfortable about them doing that, this becomes part of our bar warm up, and that's a day-by-day evaluation of where they're at. He's going to get set up, stacked up, drive straight up over his ears, maintaining good postural alignment, good spinal alignment. We don't want to see guys find mobility to press overhead in their lower back. Like whenever we start seeing them arch like that, that's not a good thing. We want them to be able to stay stacked and braced, pillared up, abs tight, and be able to press straight up, pull the bar straight back down. After he's done that 5 times, we're going to go ahead and hit his front squats to finish up. We'll generally run through this 1 to 2 times per workout session. It depends on what time of the year it is and then how heavy we do it. But we have guys that generally do their clean bar warm up with in upwards of 135 pounds. They'll go through that. Maybe the first set they do it with about 95 pounds. The second set they might go up to 135 pounds. Just depends on the athlete. Some people just do it with a bar. You know, it depends on what athlete they are. So,
and you said, Coach, you do like a lot of this stuff with your golfers. It's not just football. This isn't just football team. Like the volleyball players can do this. Golfers can do it. It's important to recognize that even athletes that we don't intend for them to do the Olympic lifts, we still use derivatives of the Olympic lifts to help them out posturally and to help them out athletically, to fix some issues that we might have. We just recognize that this is a real quick hack to be able to fix that stuff. So yeah, I do it with my golfers. We do muscle cleans, we do muscle snatches. I don't ever intend for them to do snatches or cleans or block above knee cleans or hang cleans. We don't do it, but we are able to really fix some issues that are inherent to a lot of athletes these days by exposing them to some of these movements that under load. Right.
You want to go through? I mean, do we want to do snatch bar warm up?
It'd be good to have. I mean, you
Okay.
know, and if there's something you want to say with it, you know, to just be able to show that.
Okay.
And
And
maybe talk about like some of these movements you'd have to, you know, maybe we could show them too, but teach. Talk about they have to, you know, you can't just go do this.
Right.
Those movements should be taught. Don't use it as a warm up to go, oh, look we can go do this stuff.
Yeah.
If you don't know
we do this with a stick.
Right.
Most of these.
Yeah.
If we were gonna do, so basically our summer program is set up to be basically 4 weeks and then a 4th of July break and then another 4 weeks.
Yeah, that's ours. So.
If we spent that first 4 weeks really hammering this muscle clean, I mean really trying to hammer it with them.
Yep.
What would, to finish out that 4-week summer, that second 4-week phase, what would you progress that to? Or would you
see
not?
where the kids are at? Like it depends on how often they're working out for you. So
4 days a week.
Summer thing that I did with the high school, I got them 3 days a week. Okay, and it was what we did was clean snatch, clean snatch, clean snatch, clean snatch, and it was some weeks we do snatch twice, some days we do clean twice. We didn't try and do everything on a weekly basis. It just went that way, and so it was muscle snatch, muscle clean, muscle snatch, muscle clean, muscle snatch, muscle clean, block above knee clean, power clean, block above knee snatch. At like week 3, week 4, I knew that by the time I hit the break, I probably needed to have them doing Olympic lifts or their parents were going to be upset with me.
Okay.
So it's probably faster than I would have,
Yeah.
but I started evolving it.
Yeah.
And then on the last 4 weeks, we're doing full cleans.
And let me ask you this,
power
Coach,
snatches.
and this could be a whole nother hour chalk talk, but coaches see stuff and think, okay, like just you said, oh, we got to do we got to put all this stuff into one day. We got these 2 complexes we got to do this. What's your thought process to start breaking it down? Do you look at saying, this is what we're doing today, you know, like break down the week, not just look at a day, but break down the whole week or like the 4-week cycle? how do you break that down so that we don't have coaches thinking, oh, this is all good stuff, I'm going to put all this stuff in a workout for today, and they don't need to be doing that?
I would say invest in the early parts of this, and don't feel like you have to get through the workouts. I think that's hard to say to a coach like that, but I am, even at my level, I'm not afraid. Like, my workouts are set up where I have the stuff I need to do, the stuff that's important, that's the main part of the workout. Then there's stuff that I want to do, and then there's like some sprinkles on top. I always have the prerogative that if I only get through this and this, I've gotten the training in that I needed to do. This stuff that is at the end is, I don't want it to be disposable because I want to get through that, but never be afraid to invest, especially during the early parts of your off season, in the things that are the most important. Take your time, make sure you're doing them well. Don't just try and get through it for the sake of getting through it, because there's always time to do that stuff. And what a lot of people don't want to hear, like your bench press and stuff like that, that's not going to be that important in the long run. Now, it's something that I want them doing. I want them to be able to do it, and I want them to be able to do it well. But if they're not doing their Olympic lifts well, if they're not jumping and landing well, if they're not doing their corrective work, if they're not doing their strength work, well, then it's not going to matter how much that kid bench presses. Because the fact is, like we tell everybody, if you're on your back pushing up, you're probably not very good at playing. So that's the least of my worries. I want to make sure, and you just have to decide what is important to you and prioritize that both in the long term and in the short term. Right. Workout to workout, put the priority up front, and then as you look at it in a bigger scale, make sure you're investing in the front end. And then even as let's look at it as a freshman to a senior in high school, invest in the freshman. The freshman is going to be that important. Like with us, our freshmen on the collegiate level, to me they're the most important athletes in the room, because that's where culture is developed. That's where your attention to detail, your focus, the tempo of the movement. They're the most important people because they drive the workouts. And if you'll invest in them instead of saying, well, I need to work on my starting running back over here, and the freshmen they'll make it, they'll be fine. Well, you're developing culture by investing in those younger guys, and that's where your money is at. And if you invest in them, by the time that they're seniors, you got a top spinning, and it's beautiful, and it works. So I can't tell you, like, whether it be workout to workout, season to season, or a 4-year training for an individual, invest in that early part and do it well, and
Build the foundation.
Yeah. So what Zach's going to do now is go through a snatch bar warm up. This is a little bit more complex, but you'll notice all of these movements that we're doing are complementary to one another. So even though we're doing different versions of them, we're doing the same fundamental movements every single time these guys train, either be snatch bar warm up or clean bar warm up. We do these because they're fundamental movements, and even if they're not going to be Olympic lifting athletes, they're just going to do basic barbell training, we still go through all of these because it helps us identify where some of our issues might be, and it lets us head them off earlier. Okay, so he's going to start this time, instead of from the hang, he's going to have a snatch grip. He's going to start with the bar over his head. We're going to do this. What was the first movement of the clean bar warm up? It was elevation and depression from the hang. First movement of the snatch bar warm up is elevation and depression overhead. He's going to shrug his shoulders up, trying not to move his head. We're going to make sure that we're shrugging and depressing. Shrugging and depressing. It's not enough to raise the roof and then relax. It's push up, pull down. Push up, pull down. Okay, from there he's going to lower it to the back squat position. We're going to do another simple hinge pattern. This time we're not going to do an RDL, we're going to do a good morning. It's the same movement. It's the exact same movement, just where the bar is located. So now he's got in the back squat position. He's going to have soft knees. He's going to push his hips back towards the rack, loading his hamstrings up. Try not to let those knees break forward so much. Right now, Zach is going into a mild squat pattern. We want to make sure that we're maximally loading the hamstrings. So yeah, there, I like that. I want to see those knees move back behind the ankle every day.
needs that. His abs should be tight, shouldn't be hollowing out his lower back because his back should be nice and flat. From there, we're going to go ahead and push the bar into the front position, back to the hang. We're going to do bent row again. So we started this from the bottom of an RDL. That's what he's going to do. This time the grip is a little bit wider. It's going to hit his lats just a little bit different. He's going to pull that bar into his belly button, making sure it's nice and tight to his center of gravity, flexing these muscles of his upper back. From here, we're going to do our ready, set, go cadence because we didn't go over muscle snatch. We'll do our ready, set, go cadence as he performs and executes a muscle snatch. On ready, he's going to bring the bar up to his hip crease. On set, he's going to snap down into an athletic position. On go, he's going to push into the ground and drive vertical. The bar goes up over his head as a product of his effort of pushing into the ground and not because he's trying to throw it up there. The bar travels up there because of the force he's putting into the ground. Ready, set, go! Recover. The bar is going to stay in nice and tight to his body because he's not hip tossing it. He's driving with his legs. Ready, set, go! Recover. Ready, set, go! Okay, from here, I'm going to let him do one more rep. He's going to keep the bar up over his head, and instead of doing backward lunges, we're going to do an overhead split squat. He's already got the bar up there. He's going to set his foot back. He's going to take a moment to stack his body up and drag it back just a little bit more. A lot of times, athletes are very timid about how big of a split they get there. We want to get a nice big split to where that everything stays nice and stacked up. Abs are tight. He's going to drop that knee straight down for a couple reps, and he's going to switch. We always want them to step back into position and step. They're intuitively going to want to step forward, but we find that when they step forward, they're always leaning forward also. So we want to try and get them to step into that position. That way they maintain good pelvic alignment. Spine is in a good position. After he's done those, we're going to go into, more often than not, we're going to have athletes do a back squat to press until we get them good at an overhead squat. So the next movement, he's going to lower the bar down. He's going to back squat to press, heaving the bar up over his head. And then if you could demonstrate a couple overhead squats, this would be an advanced movement. We want to get him into it that maybe Zach's just not quite ready for yet.
Coach, what are your checkpoints for that to say an athlete's ready for that? Because, you know, I do some things like firefighters and like first responders, and they always like to do stuff like that. Yeah. We go to like one arm, like dumbbell, because it just when we get both arms overhead. But so what's your kind of checkpoint maybe?
Coach, there's no easy answer to that. There's a lot of reasons why somebody being able to overhead squat is everything in the system is correct. So he might not be able to overhead squat because he has tight ankles. He might not be able to overhead squat because he has tight hips. He might not be able to overhead squat because he's got too much laxity in his lower back. He might not be able to overhead squat because his T-spine mobility is not good. He might not be able to overhead squat because of his shoulder. So what it is, you watch somebody overhead squat, somebody with as much experience as you, it comes down to seeing where that leak is, seeing where that problem is, identifying it, and then doing the corrective exercises to help mitigate that. Now, you start talking about a 30, 40-year-old firefighter, there's going to be a lot of untangling.
Yeah.
You start looking at a 13-year-old athlete, it's a little, you can fix this a lot faster than it appears. Usually, doing a back squat to press is going to help them with that movement because there's not a whole lot wrong with them yet.
But for some maybe our younger coach or coaching, it's not always just looking at where the bar positions
yeah.
at. It's like what you say, ankles,
yep.
nipples to knees.
What I tell my coaches, start from the ground, work your way up. Do you notice that his ankles are rotating in? Do you see that he's up on his toes? Well, the problem is probably something in his feet. So we want to because that affects everything else going up. If you got a problem in your foot and your ankle, it's gonna affect everything going up. But everything that is up can affect everything going down. So if you have T-spine, it's tight, and his shoulders are forward, and he can't hold the bar up over his head where he should be able to, okay, that's going to affect how you squat. You can't, your body's not going to let you do a full squat if you can't get the bar straight up over your center.
And so they can do shoulder stuff all day, and it's still not going to correct it. So
so you can do shoulder stuff all day, but he's got an ankle problem. Okay, you're spending your money in the wrong place.
Right, yep.
Start from the ground and start ticking your boxes on the way up. Go joint by joint and find out what the issue is, and then address that issue with your correctives, but still challenge them in a way that they can do the exercise.
And that's not just all the exercise, right? That each, like,
absolutely.
if there's an issue, don't just look at the issue, like where the bar is held or arm overhead, or, you know, you gotta look at the whole system.
Yeah, you do. It does.
I just want to make that point for the
That's why
coaches.
we do these bar complexes, is they're a diagnostic for our athletes every single day that they're in the room. It lets us say, hey, whoa, what's going on here? There's, like, your hip flexor's tight because you're not able to get down into position. You notice Zach struggling getting in his overhead split squat position. Him holding his position and dropping his knee down with a big split. Well, he lifted pretty damn heavy yesterday, so I imagine he's a little tight and a little sore. Hip flexors, I'd be like, hey man, we need to spend a little bit of time loosening your hip flexors back up, because right now your split squat, overhead split squat, looked tight and angry. And if we keep doing it, if we keep allowing him to do that exercise in a not quality way, it's going to create an imbalance. Not if, when. That imbalance is going to occur.
And so you're looking for imbalances too, right? Like and I'm picking, it looked like you were a little bit tighter when the right leg back and the left leg forward than the other one, in going down to that position. So as they go through this, they should be looking for imbalance, as well as they can't do the exercise or structural, but maybe it's an imbalance, like you said, to look down to.
I'm sitting here talking to you right now. My left foot is back further than my right foot. That is, to me, something I need to be conscious of, and that because I know I have a tight right hip flexor right now. The body identifies the problems that you have and the imbalances that you have.
Adapt.
The trick is finding them early and addressing them when they occur, instead of just keep feeding them load, because then they're going to get hard set. That's why that 30 to 40-year-old firefighter who's always carried his hose on this side, always walks upstairs that way, the man's going to have an imbalance. He's going to have a problem. And our job is to help mitigate that.
Right. Yeah, perfect. Good stuff.
Good. All right.
That's it.
Pipes that are really, I think they're 20 pounds. An Olympic 15 kilo bar, so 30 pounds. These are closer to like 20 pounds. And so they look like they're a bigger bar, but what I even like about them more is the fact that they're a fat bar, so they have to hold on to them with a locked wrist instead of letting it break back. We use those, and they're able to go through it. And then we graduate them up to a 15 kilo bar, and then we graduate them up to the 20 kilo bar, and then we can start adding weight. So yeah, I get it. I'm not. Now that being said, we'll use dumbbells to make, like, you can have them. When we use dumbbells, we use it to help them, give them feedback to their posture, not necessarily for load. So we can go through most of those movements. You can do a squat, you can do a backward lunge by holding it in the goblet position. But the fact is we're using that to reinforce good posture and not necessarily to do it for load. So it comes down to when they get strong enough to be able to do all those things. I don't have a great answer for you, but I would probably be more likely to use a stability ball for overhead than I would to just use a dumbbell.
We're gonna come across schools where they got 30, 40 kids signed up for their summer program, 2 squat racks. Get dowel rods, things like that. Yeah, you take dowels with you, pipes, something that's a little bit lighter than what a regular bar is, and those are just all my broken Island Games hammers.
yeah, I mean that's it though. Like, find things that work. I never would have liked those fat bars that we have. I'm like, well, these are too light to put a discernible amount of weight on, but I'm like, they're great for our light. Like, you have cheer, they're like, they can put those up over their head no problem. They weigh 20 pounds, but they're also, what I love about it, and this, like our return to play, if we had guys that had shoulder surgery or anything like that, we got one of those, by the way. I like it because it reinforces a good grip on the bar. They learn that first. They relearn that part of it first before they start taking that thinner bar and letting it break their wrist back. So same thing with an overhead squat though. We want them not in a relaxed, loose position. We want them in a slightly, there's a lot of play right there, but it needs to be that bar needs to be through that part of your hand and wrapped around it instead of in their fingertips and back. That affects how they're able to hold that. So a fat bar is really good in that regards.
With your hinges and your cleans and stuff, I mean, you can't hold the bar like this when you got the fat bar. I mean, you really got to lock.
Yeah, you absolutely do. So I think that while they're probably made for more advanced lifters, I think that they're an excellent tool for your younger people. And they're cheap. Like that's something that you can really sell that to a program and be like, hey, you get a few of these for not a lot of money, and it's really going to help you out in the long run.
Of course, someone want to get a hold of you, what's the best way for them to, if they had questions about program, high school coach, or anything like that, what's the best way maybe for them to touch base with you?
I would go to our website, goyotes.com. Also, there's my Instagram page, coach_cleat, CLETE. That's you're going to get to see a lot of what we do there. I really like sending people to that for no other reason. It's easy to sit here and talk, but most people can look and watch and see things and understand them a whole lot better. And we've just been cycling through year after year. We'll start all over again and show what our freshmen are doing and show what our veteran lifters are doing as we evolve them through the training process. Because it is a multi-year approach. I'm only in year 3 now. Year 3 to me is where magic happens. I've been building up to this point. We did our training, we do what we do, but year 3 to me in a collegiate strength and conditioning program or a high school program, anything that's based off of 3 or 4 years, year 3 is where you're starting to really gain some traction. And so check those Instagram feeds out. USD _strength is another Instagram page that we have. You're going to see all of the athletes, not just the ones that I work with. So it's it's out there.
Yeah, you're getting a lot of stuff on Instagram, Facebook, a lot of good information. So folks can check that out too. I just want to make sure they feel comfortable watching some of the stuff you're doing too, because I'm a visual guy. So like you said, we can talk on the phone, but when you come in and see it, it helps too. So we appreciate you, Zach. We appreciate you coming to help. So, thanks, guys. Appreciate it.